There has been a bunch of terrible performances the last couple weeks at UFC 298 as well as UFC Fight Night Mexico City, and we are going to break down who needs to be cut from the UFC after their performances on those cards. I've been slacking a little bit. I've had a bunch of post-fight videos to do, full card predictions, so I kind of been cutting back a little bit. And I haven't made a cuts video for the past 2 weeks, but I posted a Michael Chandler video about the red panty night fallacy, which I'll link in the description as well as the end cards. Go check it out. Somebody commented on it, was like, where's the cuts video? And I was thinking about it. I was about to go to bed, and I said, you know what? If I can make a video on Michael Chandler suffering from the sunk cost fallacy, I can make a cuts video. So we're going to go through my list of cuts for UFC 298 as well as UFC Fight Night Mexico City. We're going to end with who I believe most deserves to be cut after their performance on the card. Starting off with my very first cut. We don't even have any honorable mentions. My very first cut is Dennis Bondar, who fought on UFC Fight Night Mexico City. And he fought Ronaldo Rodriguez, who was Luis Rodriguez, but then the name changed on Tapology and the UFC's website. I don't know. Ronaldo Rodriguez. Dennis Bondar is currently on a 3-fight losing streak. He looked good in this fight. He looked decent in this fight. But then he rolls for a leg lock and just holds on to the leg, and he's just wide open for ground and pound. It was one of the most hilarious ground and pound shots I've ever seen to kind of start the finishing sequence, and then he gets choked out. And you look at his overall resume, lost to Ronaldo Rodriguez, got finished there in the second round. Before that, lost to Carlos Hernandez, where he took so much damage. Technically, it was a TKO, but well, technically, it was a decision, but it really was a brutal, nasty TKO. There was a head clash, and then the elbows that he suffered from that fight were just absolutely brutal. And then before that, he was injured in a Malcolm Gordon fight. So his last win is in 2020. His last win is literally the year before I started this channel. Let that sink in for a second. So it's time for Dennis Bondar to be cut from the organization. He's 31 years old. He can build back. His stamina isn't great, but it was at Mexico City. So I actually think he's a decent fighter, but it's time for him to be cut from the organization. Moving up on my list, next up, fought at UFC 298, and that is Carlos Vera. Fought Rinya Nakamura. Literally just laid on his back and rolled for leg locks the entire fight. It was an atrocious performance. It drove me nuts the entire time. And that was his UFC debut, but he fought on The Ultimate Fighter and lost to Brad Katona. And I just really don't think he's cut out to be in the UFC. His striking isn't that good. His grappling isn't that good. And the fact that he's just rolling for submissions nonstop, and he's 36 years old. I mean, why was he even on The Ultimate Fighter? I know they had like the veterans versus the prospects. He better not have been a prospect. I remember people talking about, why do we have all these old fighters as prospects? Carlos Vera literally looked atrocious against Nakamura, and Nakamura didn't even look that good. Horrible performance. Overall record is 11-4, so it's not horrible, but he's 36 years old. And he's going to turn 37 later this year. I'm just looking at this resume. It's just, and losing to Brad Katona, I mean, even the guys he's beaten aren't even that good, you know, outside the UFC at Fury FC. He's not that good. Does not belong in the UFC whatsoever. I know it's only a 2-fight losing streak. One was technically an exhibition, so I guess 1-fight losing streak. I know it was his UFC debut, and it was, I believe, on short notice. So maybe give him one more chance, but honestly, I could tell already. 36 years old, he's not cut out to be in the UFC. He will never be UFC caliber. He's super bottom of the barrel for the UFC, so cut him from the organization. Moving up on my list, and this is from UFC Fight Night Mexico City. I've intertwined all these if you haven't noticed, is Daniel Lacerda. Now, Daniel Lacerda, I actually really like Daniel Lacerda, but now he's on a 5-fight losing streak? Yeah, 5-fight losing streak. It really should be a 6-fight losing streak, to be honest. He lost to Edgar Chairez. Got triangled basically immediately. And honestly, the fight that ended in a no contest back in September should have been a loss too. He was choked out cold. The referee made a bad decision in overturning it. I will die on that hill. He was choked out in the guillotine. He woke back up before he was dropped to the canvas by Edgar Chairez. Chairez got robbed of a win there, but then he goes out and gets it. I mean, Lacerda has no stamina. We saw it against CJ Vergara. He hurt him early, chased after him. CJ Vergara was pulling the Chelsea Chandler. Gassed out, couldn't get the finish. Before that, lost to Victor Altamirano. Before that, lost to Francisco Figueiredo. Before that, lost to Jeff Molina. Every single one of these fights he's got finished in. Got finished by strikes against Jeff Molina. Got knee barred against Figueiredo. Got ground and pound by Altamirano. Got ground and pound by Vergara. And now got submitted by Chairez twice. That's not UFC caliber at all. He's only 27, but he's 11-6. I think he could build back. I think he could come back. I think he's got a lot of promising talent, but too explosive, doesn't have jiu-jitsu. I mean, he shot it on a double leg because they were having decent striking exchanges. Honestly, I thought it was 50-50 in the striking. Shot it on the double leg, basically got immediately triangled, had absolutely no defense of the triangle. So it's time to cut Daniel Lacerda. Moving up on my list, we have old Val Woodburn. Val Woodburn does not belong in the UFC whatsoever. He got a short notice opportunity against Bo Nickel. Got absolutely slumped out cold in the first round badly. Literally offered nothing in that fight. Then most recently at UFC 298, he fought Oban Elliott. And he rocked him early, but that was only after he got clipped with a big shot. And then Oban kind of rushed in. Val Woodburn is not UFC caliber. I mean, I could have told you that from the first time he got the opportunity against Bo Nickel. They just wanted to guarantee Bo Nickel a win. And Val Woodburn has absolutely no grappling to speak of. He's 7-2. He's still relatively inexperienced. He can still build back. He's still got a couple years to kind of build back to the UFC. 2-fight losing streak. And what's crazy is those are his first 2 professional losses. So I do kind of feel bad for him. But Oban Elliott isn't even that good. So the fact you're getting literally dominated outside of, rocking him in the first round when he kind of got over aggressive, you don't belong in the UFC. Val Woodburn couldn't have stuffed a takedown to save his life. He doesn't have a great gas tank. He's just one of these kind of strong, powerful, stocky guys looking to clip you with a big KO shot and end your life. And that's really all he has. If he can't find that, he doesn't have anything to offer. And it's not even like he has super technical striking whatsoever. I mean, the reason I make these videos, people cry and whine, Joey, why are you talking about cutting this fighter? Why are you talking about that cutting that fighter? The barrier of entry to get into the UFC has lowered substantially over the last few years because there's so many cards. They have to fill out these cards, and there's so many guys that get into the UFC now that would have been like, there's no chance they get in the UFC 4 or 5 years ago. And that's kind of Val Woodburn. He got a short notice opportunity, got slumped out by Bo Nickel, gets a second opportunity because he did take the first opportunity on short notice, but he truly does not belong. He's not ready, doesn't belong. It's time for the UFC to cut Val Woodburn. Moving up on my list, sticking with UFC 298, we need to cut Andrea Lee. Andrea Lee's a bum. She's a bum. She's now 13-9. She's on a 4-fight losing streak. She's 35 years old. She has a racist husband. Did I mention that? I mean, the only thing I wonder about when Andrea Lee's fights, are we going to get some type of racial slur in the corner from Tony Kelly? Because that's the type of person he is. So if that's the only thing I'm wondering about when you fight, I don't want to see you fight anymore. She has no fight IQ. Fair enough. I mean, she's fought some decent opponents. Miranda Maverick, she recently lost at UFC 298. Before that, lost to Natalia Silva. Before that, lost to Macy Barber, which was a brutal robbery, to be honest. And before that, lost to Viviana Araujo. So, fair enough. But, I mean, sandwiched in between those 4 losses is 2 wins and then another 3 losses. So, she is 2-7 in her last 9 fights. That is crazy. Listen to her wins. Her wins aren't even good. Ashley Evans-Smith, Montana De La Rosa, Antonio Shevchenko, Cynthia Calvillo. She's horrible. She's horrible. Andrea Lee, I mean, she has no fight IQ. And the Natalia Silva fight, she's clearly getting beat up in the striking, never even tries to take her down. The Miranda Maverick fight, she had basically nothing to offer in that fight outside of a first-round suplex, Kurt Angle suplex. She has nothing. She has no power. She has no striking. Then the fact that every time she goes back to the corner, Tony Kelly's like, yeah, get that dirty Brazilian, and like weird shit like that. And, she has a track record, if you know, you know. But I just think she doesn't belong in the UFC anymore. Even with the divisions, the women's divisions not being particularly stacked, this division, it's just the flyweight division, the strawweight division, which I think she might have fought at strawweight before, but I'm not sure. Either way, the flyweight division is kind of prospering with decent talent. Andrea Lee's totally unnecessary at 35 years old, 4-fight losing streak. It's time to cut her from the organization. Moving up on my list to second to last on my list, and this was I was really debating about putting him at number 1, and that is Claudio Pes. Claudio Pes lost a split decision to Fares Diem. It should not have been a split decision. It should have been a unanimous 30-27 decision for Fares Diem. But he lost at UFC Mexico City. Absolute embarrassment of a performance. His family should disown him. If he has a wife, she should just divorce him. And honestly, he needs to be cut from the organization. He needs to find another career. All he did was spam takedowns and not throw any shots on the ground. That's literally all he did. I don't know if he landed one damaging shot the entire fight. And then he would have moments where he would have control time. Even one moment he had full mount, didn't get any damage off. And then he would get reversed, end up on bottom. And then every time he would end up on bottom, it was like he was in a finishing sequence where Ferziem would start raining down hammer fists and just smashing him. I mean, Claudio Pes should have been cut for the performance before this against Dan Hooker, where he's just dragging his ass all up and down the canvas like a dog dragging his ass on the carpet. Has absolutely no striking. And he's basically one of these guys who is just a jiu-jitsu specialist where, he's going to basically spam takedowns over and over and over again and pray he ends up getting a knee bar. And that's kind of what he did in this fight against Ferziem. He just spammed takedowns. He had no striking. He hasn't seemed to improve. He's been in the UFC for a while, actually. Let me look at how long has he been in the UFC? He's been in the UFC. That's crazy. Since 2016, he's been in the UFC. That is straight up wild. Or at least, I don't know if he got cut for a while because he lost in 2016 and then he didn't fight for a while. Then he came back in 2018, but it appears that he's been in the UFC since 2015, 2016, or 2016. I don't exactly remember. But either way, he's been in the UFC long enough. And he's beat nothing but bums. Marcos Mariano, Jordan Levitt, Chris Gutzmacher, Clay Guida. Clay Guida and the boys weren't happy about that, I'll tell you that much. But either way, he's just got lucky with knee bar. Well, not got lucky, but he's just found knee bars and submissions in multiple of these fights. But second he gets a step up in competition against Dan Hooker, gets smashed, drags his ass all over the canvas like a dog on the carpet. Then he goes against Ferziem and same thing. This guy's an embarrassment to the sport. He doesn't have any striking ability. He doesn't have anything other than jiu-jitsu and grappling. And quite frankly, I never want to see Claudio Pes ever fight again after getting absolutely destroyed by Ferziem. And he would have been on this list even if he would have somehow been gifted a split decision, which would have been an absolute travesty to the sport. Moving on to my number one cut from over the last 2 weeks. And you're not going to expect this one, because my number one cut is Herb Dean. And, I don't even remember all the mistakes that Herb Dean made over the last 2 weeks, but we're going to just talk we're going to zoom out and look at the grand scheme of things with Herb Dean. But first off, the reason he made this list this week, what was he doing in the Brandon Moreno, Brandon Royval fight? They would clinch up for less than 2 seconds, and Herb Dean would be like, let's work. Let's work. I mean, did somebody have like a bounty? Did somebody have like a hostage situation? And they're like, if there's any clinching in this fight, your family's going to get it if you don't break them immediately. It was the most bizarre thing. He did it like 3 or 4 times. There was like multiple weird breaks where he would give him 2 seconds. He would start clapping at him. And then he would break him like 5 seconds later. It was crazy. It was horrible reffing. And then what drives me nuts about Herb Dean, and I don't remember any specific instances from the last 2 weeks, but he's a guy that is just perpetually making mistakes. Stopping fights too early, stopping fights too late. And one thing that is oddly specific to Herb Dean is indecisiveness. You'll see him like go in, go out, go in, go out. I remember Marina Rodriguez, Amanda Ribas. Like, it ended up being like a double TKO because he's like touching him and then he's not touching him like he doesn't know whether to get in there, get out. He landed a leg drop on Dustin Poirier after he got KO'd by Justin Gaethje for the BMF title. Herb Dean used to be the best referee when I first started watching. Now he has fallen off a cliff. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's checked out. And also, and this isn't really specific to him, but he does this. I'm so sick and tired of these refs. Instead of enforcing the rules, they just scream the rules over and over and over again. Don't grab the fence. Don't grab the fence. Don't grab the fence. Take a point. Take a point. And I will never forget, and luckily I've only talked about this on really live streams. I will never forget, Herb Dean needs to be sent to prison. He needs to be sent to prison for what he did to CB Dalloway many, many years ago. Look it up. It was CB Dalloway versus some Russian guy. I can't even remember his name. I wouldn't even be able to pronounce it if I found it right now. But it was the worst stoppage I've ever seen. This guy was just pounding on CB Dalloway for like a minute straight, right? Probably longer than a minute. And CB Dalloway was laying there like a dead body. I mean, it was like he wasn't moving at all. He was just kind of turtled up. And Herb didn't even stop the fight. He didn't even stop the fight. And then the round ended, and then Herb started poking his dead body with a stick, and he was like, move, do something, move, do something. And then finally CB Dalloway didn't get up because he just got beaten to death. It was literally a bludgeoning. And then Herb was finally like, okay, let me stop the fight. So Herb's a terrible ref. I almost said a terrible ref. I don't know how I'm misspeaking tonight. But Herb's a terrible ref who used to be good and indecisive, doesn't enforce the rules, horrible stoppages, horrible communication with fighters, constantly just clapping away and clapping away and clapping away, never actually doing anything when they're actually breaking rules. Then he's separating fighters after 2 seconds of clinching like this isn't MMA anymore. What is this all of a sudden, just boxing? Is that what you're doing now? So Herb is my number 1 cut on the list. Let me know if I missed anyone in this cuts list from 298 or UFC Fight Night Mexico City. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and thank you so much for watching.